I am presenting Union Gospel Press's Sunday School Lesson number 12, Sunday, February 22nd, 2026. The lesson is entitled Run Toward Holiness. Lesson text comes from Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 17. Related scriptures are Philippians chapter 3, verses 7 through chapter 4, verse 1, Hebrews chapter 5, verses 7 through 9, Isaiah chapter 35, verses 1 through 8, James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18, Genesis chapter 25, verses 29 through 34, and chapter 27, verses 36 through 38. The place is unknown. Time is between 60 and 69 AD. Life is hard. Every one of us has faced trials, the loss of a loved one, illness, the ridicule of our neighbors or co-workers. When these trials arise, it can be tempting to turn to the pleasures of the world to numb our pain and sustain us. But Hebrews 12, 1 through 17 teaches that these moments call for endurance, which results in a life of holiness. Today's aim, facts. To see what the author of Hebrews had to say to spur Christians on to a life of holiness. Principle, to understand how we need to endure trials, looking to the example of Christ and accepting God's discipline in order to grow in holiness. Application, to strive for holiness by being at peace with our brothers and sisters in Christ and by enduring the trials of this life. Illustrating the lesson. We do not live out the Christian faith alone. God has surrounded us with a cloud of witnesses, including Jesus himself, to encourage us as we endure this life and seek holiness. Practical points. 1. Old Testament heroes persisted in faith while awaiting Christ's coming. We should do the same. Hebrews 12:1. 2. Nothing in this world is worth tearing our fixed gaze away from Jesus. Verse 2. 3. Our perspective on life is always better when seen in light of Jesus' sufferings. Verses 3 through 4. 4. The faithful disciple submits to the loving Father's discipline. Verses 5 through 11. 5. Holiness is not optional for believers. They should cooperate with God's discipline to root out sin. Verses 12 through 14. 6. We should never sacrifice eternal reward for temporary pleasure. Verses 15 through 17. Golden text. Wherefore, seeing we are also compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which do so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Hebrews 12:1. Today we have 4 lesson outlines. The first is laying aside hindrances. Hebrews 12:1 through 2. 2. Seeing Jesus' endurance. Hebrews 12:3 through 4. 3. Accepting fatherly discipline. Hebrews 12:5 through 13. And 4. Pursuing peace and holiness. Hebrews 12:14 through 17. Introduction. Our unit on God's holy expectation culminates with the well-known running metaphor of Hebrews 12. Pursuing holiness is like running a race because it requires endurance. Some of the best long-distance runners have said that to run a good race, a runner must die 3 times throughout the race. That is a dramatic way of saying that a long-distance race involves intense sacrifice on the part of the runner. Perhaps the writer of Hebrews had a similar dying metaphor in mind because he thought the Christian race should involve resisting sin to the point of shedding blood, Hebrews 12:4. Jesus is our ultimate example in this race because he literally bled and died in order to finish his race. Yet, he considered that death joy because of what it accomplished. Even as the pain of pushing through a long race gives way to the exhilaration of finishing the race, so it is with a life of holiness. Laying aside hindrances. Hebrews 12:1. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Verse 2. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. In chapter 11, the apostle outlined and discussed the inspiring list of Israel's heroes who lived and persevered in faith. Now, he named them collectively as a great cloud of witnesses. He implored the Jewish Christian converts to follow their example by invoking the imagery of a race. Believers must cut off any excess weight that might hinder their progress. Sin is like a net that inevitably entangles runners' feet. The apostle viewed sin as a trap that would keep believers from growing spiritually. Good runners are deliberate and intentional about discarding unnecessary weight and avoiding roots, vines, and anything else that might trip them. Since it is sin that entangles and weighs us down, believers are to take inventory of any such hindrances. Then we are to wage war against the sins we carry and anything that distracts us spiritually so that we can more effectively run the race. The opening sentence of Hebrews 12 ties the race metaphor to the apostles' exhortation to persevere on the path that Israel's previous faithful heroes ran. To do so, believers must look to Jesus, who is the ultimate example of endurance and faithfulness. As we fix our gaze on him as our supreme example, he inspires us to endure opposition and persecution from those who despise Jesus the Messiah. Supporting his call to fix our eyes on Jesus, the apostle asserted that Jesus is the author of our faith. This depicts Jesus as the trailblazer, a pioneer who leads the way and sets the example for others to follow. He further asserted that Jesus is the finisher of our faith. This emphasizes his role in bringing our faith to maturity. It conveys that our daily walk of faith is progressing with each step to our journey's end. When we fix our eyes on Jesus, we can follow him so that our faith is brought to maturity. Seeing Jesus' endurance, verse 3. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. Verse 4. Ye have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. Verses 3 through 4 highlight how Jesus modeled endurance and suffering. The apostle urged believers to do the same so that they do not grow weary or lose heart in their own struggles. He implied to his persecuted Jewish Christian audience that the community leaders and their own family members who persecuted them were behaving like the vile sinners who crucified the innocent Messiah. Knowing this and seeing Jesus' example, we gain strength, motivation, and perspective when sinners in our own communities persecute us for our faith. As our trailblazer, Jesus endured the malicious hostility he endured is well documented in the trial and crucifixion scenes of the four Gospels, the sort of persecution that few of us ever face. Because Jesus went through such intense persecution, he knows what it is like when believers go through their own difficulties. 2:14 through 18. He gives believers the strength to endure persecution. The apostle knew his audience well enough to see that they were growing weary as they were harassed in various ways. His comments suggest that he feared they were at risk of giving in and giving up. He sensed a loss of determination and confidence that is necessary to run the race to completion. The struggle is real. Believers may experience great disappointment, not only through concerted persecution against them, but also through long-term difficulties like unemployment, illness, family conflict, and even litigation and bureaucratic ordeals. Christians should rally around one another in prayer and personal support. But the apostles' first remedy was to look to Jesus. The apostle's statement in verse 4 is similar to a parent or teacher telling children who are pouting and feeling sorry for themselves to grow up and quit being wimps. Yes, the apostle recognized that his audience was going through difficult times, but he put things into perspective. He pointed out that none of them had been martyred or spilled their blood for Christ. This was yet another way to aid their determination to finish the race. The apostle then pivoted to another fault of his readers: their failure to perceive hardships as acts of loving discipline. Accepting fatherly discipline, verse 5. And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. Verse 6. For whom the Lord loveth, he chastiseth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. Verse 7. If ye endure chastising, then dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? Verse 8. For if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye bastards and not sons. Verse 9. Furthermore, we have had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? Verse 10. For they verily for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure, but he for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. Verse 11. Now, no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Verse 12. Wherefore, lift up the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees. Verse 13. And make straight paths for your feet, lest that which is lame be turned out of the way, but let it rather be healed. The importance of discipline, Hebrews 12, 5 through 11. Verses 5 through 11 reminded the Jewish believers that God's discipline is a sign of their identity as God's children. The author quoted Proverbs 3:11 through 12 to illustrate this principle. Just as an earthly father disciplines his child out of love, God disciplines believers to bring about maturity and holiness. God was allowing the Jewish Christians to experience persecution precisely to purify their faltering faith. Discipline encompasses training, instruction, and correction. God's discipline is not in anger or malice, but comes comes from pure love. It is intended to shape believers more into the image of Christ. Believers should not reject, despise, or ignore God's gracious acts of discipline. Rather, discipline is evidence of the privileged familial status that believers have with God. They are his children, just as an earthly father disciplines his children too for their own good, so also the heavenly Father disciplines his children for their spiritual growth and conformity to Christ. The author so strongly emphasized parental discipline of children that he argued that any lack of discipline indicates the child's illegitimacy. The author alluded to his own first century culture, which may not have an exact equivalent to our modern Western culture. Greco-Roman men who did not consider a child their own would not bother to love and discipline the child. Confidently, the apostle asserted that his audience should be assured of their privileged status because God was, in fact, disciplining them. The apostle was drawing from general truths. He knew that human parents are imperfect, noting that they discipline their children as they deem best in their own limited understanding. God, however, is not like faulty human parents who might not discipline children in the right way all the time. Rather, God is the good Father who fully understands our situation and fragility. He supplies what we need to share fully in his holiness, including discipline when necessary. In Hebrews 12:11, the apostle waxed proverbial, asserting almost humorlessly that no person would think discipline is pleasant. Of course, we know it is downright painful. And as we read these words, let us pause for a moment to weep over those difficult days of affliction when we went through such pain. Now we can reflect with the apostle and understand that those difficult times when we soaked our beds in tears were actually times when God was working in our hearts to produce a great harvest of righteousness. As the psalmist said, we went out weeping and planting seed, but returned rejoicing, carrying the harvest with us. Psalms 126, 5-6. It was not just a harvest of righteousness, but of peace. The call to endure, Hebrews 12:12-13. The apostle closed his argument the way he typically did after other major sections in Hebrews, with an exhortation to do what was necessary to persevere. 2:1-4, 3:1, 12-19, 4:11, 14, chapter 10, verses 19-25, chapter 12, verses 1-3, and 25-29. Using direct language, he told them to strengthen their hands, which hang down, and the feeble knees. This refers to limp, drooping hands and weak, trembling knees. The apostle conveyed that the children of the king should get up, stand strong, and get on with the glorious race. Pursuing peace and holiness, verse 14. Follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord, verse 15. Looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled, verse 16. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright, verse 17. For ye know how that afterward, when he would have inherited the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. Virtues to pursue, Hebrews 12:14-15. Verses 14 through 17 exhort believers to pursue peace, unity, and holiness, focusing on cultivating healthy relationships and striving for personal sanctification. Especially given the distress from the larger unbelieving Jewish community against Jewish Christians, the apostle urged his audience to pursue peace with one another. He knew that eternal stresses within a church only exacerbated external pressures. Instead of dividing within the church, believers should stand in solidarity with other believers. He had already noted how some of them had even joined other believers in prison as a sign of their unity. 10:32 through 35. That is the kind of solidarity that the church needs in times of persecution. Along with peace, the apostle implored them to pursue holiness. In the Christian life, drooping hands and shaking knees are often accompanied by a flagging concern for holiness. Christian holiness is not optional. Without it, we will not see the Lord. 12:14. Holiness distinguishes us from those who persecuted Christ. Verse 3. As we live our lives in a world that honors what is vile to God, Psalms 12:8, we must not arrogantly presume that our holy God has nothing to say about how we live. Living in peace and holiness is essential for maintaining a vibrant relationship with God and with fellow believers. Despite his audience's clear profession of belief in Jesus, the apostle nonetheless urged them to take care lest they failed to live up to the grace that had been given to them. Believers should live their lives in light of the empowering grace that God eagerly provides us. In the chaotic times of the Jewish Christians' distress, the apostle warned about buried bitterness that might burst forth to disturb the well-being of the church and individual believers. An example to avoid, Hebrews 12:16 through 17. In this short concluding paragraph, the apostle specifically referred to sexual immorality, any fornicator, and godliness, citing Jacob's brother Esau as a prime example. The author urged the faltering Jewish Christian converts to realize how valuable God's promises are. They must not exchange God's messianic promises for some momentary gain and thus lose their place in God's messianic blessing as Esau did. The apostle noted the irreversible consequences of Esau's choice to sell his birthright for a single meal. Despite his great regret, Esau could not reverse the sale. His decision serves as a solemn warning to believers to value and appreciate the spiritual blessing and inheritance purchased for them by Christ. Concluding the race, Hebrews 12:1 through 17. Brings the celebration of the great heroes of the faith in chapter 11 to a climax. The apostle told his weak-kneed Jewish Christian friends to join the great cloud of witnesses, the faithful Messianic community, and fix their eyes on Jesus, their exalted companion. The great cloud of witnesses, 12:1, reminds us that our faith journey is not solitary but connected to a rich heritage of faithful men and women. To finish our race, we must divest ourselves of any excess weight and the snares of sin, embracing God's loving discipline, and steadfastly hold to our precious and eternally valuable God-given birthright through holy living. By God's strength and guidance, we can run the race with endurance, knowing that our eternal reward far outweighs any temporary trials we may face. Questions. 1. What does Hebrews 12 present as a hindrance to running the Christian race? 2. What does it mean for Jesus to be the author and finisher of our faith? Verse 2. 3. Why was Jesus' crucifixion especially encouraging to the readers of Hebrews? 4. How could the Jewish Christians know they were legitimate children of God? 5. How did first century Roman culture help the author make that point? 6. What benefit ultimately comes from good discipline? 7. What exhortation did the author intend through his reference to hands which hang down and the feeble knees, verse 12? 8. How does eternal peace in the church help with the goal of attaining maturity of faith? 9. What is Christian holiness? Why is Christian holiness so important? 10. What solemn warning can we learn from the negative example of Esau? This concludes the Sunday school lesson for Sunday, February 22nd, 2026. Thank you for listening. Please remember to click the subscribe tab. God bless.